So let's first of all look at the tunes that involve a falling nuclear tone. And here we've got 4 kinds of falling tune listed on the screen and also on your handout. So the first falling tune is high head and high fall. And this combination is a tune a common will call the high drop. As you go high up, then you drop down. Like this. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. We go up for the very, start the high head on the onset very, stay up there high, and then fall down, drop down on think. She's the very person I was thinking about. Do it with me. She's the very person I was thinking about. Again. She's the very person I was thinking about. That's right. That's the high drop. If you have the same thing but with a low fall, perhaps you could say it's the same thing in a different key. Anyhow, the high head and the low fall, we get a combination that they call the low drop. So it starts in the same way. She's the very person I was. But then instead of da, a fall from that high level or a bit higher, we jump down to a lower level and drop from there. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. I was da. You hear that abrupt step down, ready for the low fall. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. Just let's contrast those first two. The high drop, she's the very person I was thinking about. Low drop, she's the very person I was thinking about. Difference is one of the amount of heart you put into it, the amount of enthusiasm, the amount of personal involvement. So the high drop, lots of involvement, she's the very person I was thinking about. The second one, she's the very person I was thinking about. I used to teach drama students, people practicing to become actors, actresses. I found it difficult to begin with in the classroom to get them to do low falls. They were wanting to show that they had lots of energy, bags of go, and wanted to be vivacious all the time, so they wanted to use high falls. When I said you've got to use a low fall, that sounds so depressed, so uninteresting, so boring, that they didn't want to do it, until of course I explained this was a dramatic exercise and they had to put on that persona of being dull and boring, and then they could do it. Alright, the third kind of fall is known as the jackknife by Colin Harlow. This has a high head and then a rise fall. A rise fall is that duh. So we start the same way, she's the very person I was, but then we get ah. Now, in the case of a rise fall, the nucleus, if there's a tail, the nucleus is mid, the next syllable has a bit of high pitch on it. If there's a longish tail, 3 syllables or more, then the second syllable is high, and the remaining ones are low. Thinking about. Thinking about. Thinking about. Thinking about. So we've got now to have, she's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. And you have this strange phenomenon of a high-pitched but unstressed ing, just like the nucleus. Thinking about. So that non-native speakers of English investigating English intonation have sometimes been misled by this, and they think the nucleus is on the ing syllable, but it isn't. It's on the pitch rather unprominent think syllable. She's the very person I was thinking about. Okay, the last kind of falling tune is the one with the rising heads. They call the long jump. You know when you do the long jump in athletics, you start and you sprint and you get faster and faster, and you take off, and then you land at the end of the jump, hopefully having jumped a long way. So it's like this. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. There we got that rising head. She's the very person I was thinking about. Right, you see, we're ready to take off, thinking about, and there's our jump. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. This has something more of a protesting note. Somebody says, well, you might at least Bear in mind Mary, well, she's the very person I was thinking about. Notice the difference between the high drop and the long jump. High drop, she's the very person I was thinking about. A sudden jump up to very. She's the very person I was thinking about. The rising head on the other hand with the long jump, she's the very person I was thinking about. Okay. So those are the four forms, the four falling tunes. We turn now to the rising tunes. There are also four rising tunes, if we include with them the level tone, the terrace tone, which, as far as its meaning is concerned, is like a rise. It has a meaning that is virtually interchangeable with that of the low rise very often. Okay, so the first of the rising tones is what we call the, if we take the order that's on the board, the terrace tone. This is a different order on the handout. I apologise for that. So the terrace tone is the high head and mid-level. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, bung, bung. Never get down low. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about, and that's why I mentioned her. Has this non-final meaning. She's the very person I was thinking about, and that's why I mentioned her. She's the very person I was thinking about. Just three level tones. She's the very person I was thinking about. Yes, it's a good thing to practice this, prolonging it to make sure you don't rise or fall at the end. She's the very person I was thinking about. Try it with me now. She's the very person I was thinking about. Try it again. She's the very person I was thinking about. Yes. Remember the example I gave you in the previous lecture? That's the end of the weather forecast. Then we go on to the news. Okay. Now, next on the board and first on the handout is the low bounce. This is made up of a high head and a low rise. So it starts like the high heads we were practicing before. She's the very person I was. But then we drop abruptly down to the lowest pitch and low rise from there. Thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. Why do I hear all these people saying was? I'm not saying was, I'm saying was. Week 4. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. That's better. I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. Then the next one, the high bounce, that's a high head and a high rise. Usually, as we saw, this has a questioning meaning. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. That's easy, isn't it? Except, again, notice that the nucleus is think, not as you might suppose bout, even though bout is higher. Thinking about, thinking about, thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. And the last one, the takeoff, this is low head and low rise. Now, here you've got to imagine an aircraft taxiing to the runway. It starts off, it stays on the runway to begin with, then when it's ready, it rotates and it starts off up into the sky. So here we've got, she's the taxiing along. Very person I was getting up speed, thinking about, and off we go. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. Alright, so the nucleus, as always, marks the turning point. In this case, it's when the pilot says rotate and the aircraft starts to move upwards. Okay, those are our rising tones. Now the falling rising tunes. Two of these. There is one that has a fall rise nucleus, first of all. Now, as we saw last time, the kind of head very closely associated with the fall-rise nucleus, is the falling head, or the sympathetic version, the sliding head. So what we have then for this combination is switchback, is a falling head, and a fall-rise. Do you know what a switchback is? It's a kind of entertainment you get at fairs, carnivals, what in some languages you call Russian mountains or lunar parks, where you get in a carriage like a railway and it goes round and round, but it goes sharply up and down and in and out and round. That's a switchback. And that's the kind we have in this tone, in this tune, because it sounds like this. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. So we have this falling head. It sounds as if we're going down to the bottom, but we jerk back up again, and we have a dip down and up thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. That's the switchback then. And the last tune, the last combination, is this strange one that has two separate nuclei, because we have a high head and high fall, as if we were having a high drop, but then we get a low rise stuck on the end. Now, in many cases, when we have this general pattern, we might just say, well, we have two separate tone groups. We've first of all got a high drop, high head, high fall, then we've got a take-off, a low rise. And that's true in many cases, for example, when we have an adverbial. We had a lovely dinner on Thursday. But the problem is that it often arises in cases where there doesn't seem to be any syntactic justification for treating it like that, where we haven't got a final adverbial, some kind of afterthought, something like some separate clause, but on the contrary, it's just an ordinary, simple clause. So that apart from the intonation phenomena, one would think that it would be a simple tone unit, single tone unit. And that's really why we have to recognize this compound tone, because it seems to have a meaning that is unitary and covers a stretch of speech which is unitary, even though in terms of accents it looks as if it's compound. So what we get is, she's the very person, there's our high fall, she's the very person I was thinking about, she's the very person I was thinking about, she's the very person I was thinking about, not was, she's the very person I was thinking about. Yes. This tone, this tune, I'm sorry, the great beauty of this tune is that it enables you to concentrate attention on an early nucleus while nevertheless retaining something for the last content word, which therefore doesn't have to be new. So this is a way, when you've got some new information at the end, but you nevertheless want to concentrate on information earlier on, that you can do that, because you put the first nucleus on the early bit of information you want to concentrate on, focus on, and nevertheless keep a low rise for the second, which is the last place where the nucleus perhaps ought to go. So you want to emphasize the very person, meaning the identical person, the same person. She's the very person I was thinking about. This is sometimes used for utterances that are rather pompous, what we call sententious. I remember a former Prime Minister once in a political speech saying, "The future lies before us." Very true. But by giving it this intonation, he made it sound important. Putting the nucleus on future, the future lies before us. Going on to say, of course, we must plan for it. In churches where we come to the point in the service where they want to collect money, you'll sometimes hear the minister say, "A collection will now be taken." A collection will now be taken. Now you see, this has the advantage, it enables us to put the first nucleus, concentrate the focus on the crucial word, the collection of money. But since taken, all right, what else do you do to collections but take them? Nevertheless, it is new, so you give it a bit of emphasis by giving it the rising part of the 4 plus rise. So, the second example on the handout, it's quite difficult to maneuver an example that has a head plus a high fall plus a low rise. That's 3 accents, of course, and the last 2 nuclear. But we could have, she's the very person I was thinking might come. She's the very person I was thinking might come. She's the very person I was thinking might come. Yeah, she's the very person I was thinking might come. Right. Now, we come to the perhaps the crucial part. How do we actually make these tunes when we want to produce them ourselves? It's not difficult to produce a nuclear tone in isolation. With a bit of practice, you can do a tone and a tail. With a bit more practice, you can do various kinds of head and pre-head. The problem is putting them together and producing them all in sequence. So my advice is you start by practicing the nuclear tone and the tail. This is if you're reading from a text that has tone marks on it. Start by practicing the nuclear tone itself and the tail. Practice the high fall or the low rise or whatever it might be. Once you've mastered that, once you can do that, then add the head, if there is one. And do it with the head. And then if there's a pre-head, add the pre-head. And then you've got the whole thing. Now you notice that this is the opposite order from the way it appears on the page and the way you're going to say it when it's all ready. When it's completed, you will start with the pre-head, go on with the head, and end with the tail. With the nucleus before the tail. But for practicing it, it's best to start with the nucleus, then get nucleus tail, then head nucleus tail, and finally pre-head head nucleus tail. Building up, in fact, from the end rather than from the beginning. So if we look again at the low bounce, can you see the low bounce, the high head and low rise? Number 3 on the handout, that was the very person I was thinking about. If you wanted to do this from writing, first of all find the nucleus, which is think. Practice a low rise, think, do that, think. Then do the nucleus plus tail, thinking about. Then try the head, which is high level. Very person I was. Then the head plus nucleus plus tail. Very person I was thinking about. Okay, then the pre-head as well. She's the very person I was thinking about. Alright, and then that was classroom practice. The last step is to convert that into real life, seize an appropriate opportunity and say it in a realistic way. She's the very person I was thinking about. She's the very person I was thinking about. Well, that's making tunes. The other problem is to recognize tunes. How do we hear a whole tune? In a dictation, for example, or when you're facing real life and you want to work out what's happening in the intonation. Well, my advice again is first of all to locate the nucleus, decide where the nucleus is. This is not necessarily easy. Some people find it very difficult to get this part correct. If you don't get it correct, everything else is going to be wrong. So it's very important to recognize the place of the nucleus correctly. One of the ways you recognize it is by picking out one of these patterns that we've been looking at. If you think the nucleus is on very, and we've got, she's the very person I was thinking about, you're confronted with a supposed nuclear tone that goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, there's no nuclear tone in the tone that looks like that. So that would tell you that the nucleus couldn't have been then on very. So you've got to locate the nucleus not only by saying what sounds the most prominent, but also what sounds prominent, accented, and has a pitch pattern associated with itself and what follows, the tail, which is one of the nuclear tones that I recognize. Now in real life, 99.8% of tone groups have got a tone that's one of those that we've taught you. There is a tiny residue of even more complicated nuclear tones that we don't teach you. I'll teach you it now. The rise, fall, rise, that goes like this, comes in things like, little girl says, "Ah, what a lot of books you've got in your house, Mrs. Jones. We get lots of books from the library too, but we take ours back." All right, now, yes, there we've got this rise, fall, rise. Ours. Ours. It combines in its meaning the rise, fall of smugness and the fall, rise of contrastiveness. Now, it's very rare that you want to be both smug and contrastive, and that's why it's a very rare tone, and why we don't teach it to you. But that's what it was. Anyhow, back to recognizing those. That's so rare, you can ignore it. So locate the nucleus and identify the shape of the nucleus plus 10. Find out what kind of nuclear tone that is that we have. Then, if there is a head, and you remember there may not be a head, but if there is a head, locate the onset. Where does the head start? And from that you can identify the type of head. One of the ones that we have been looking at. And lastly, identify the type of pre-head, which will normally be low, but may occasionally be very high. I often conduct oral exams. Last month we were doing this for our own students, and one of the things they typically have to do is to identify an intonation pattern, where the examiner says a sentence in a particular way, or actually usually the candidate has to say it in a particular way. Many people can do this confidently and well, but there are always some who get into a terrible mess, and because I'm an examiner, I can't jump in and say, look, remember how to do it. But if I was teaching them in class, I'd remind them, don't try and identify the whole thing as a whole. I mean, maybe you can, but if you can't, if you're puzzled, do it one thing at a time. First of all, decide where the nucleus is. Get the nuclear tone right. Only after you've done that need you worry about the prenuclear pattern.